2 boys showed up at my farm with one backpack between them, and the person who tried hardest to send the older one away was the woman who taught me how to hold a baby. She loved the little one before he'd even let go of his brother's hand. The 7-year-old, Sunshine, she called him. The 16-year-old, the one who never smiled for photos, she called a risk. Then on a Tuesday in March, standing in my own kitchen with flour still on her hands, she set down the rolling pin and said, "Send Eli back before this gets official. Keep the easy one." That night, at 1:45, I heard the barn door, not the house door, the barn. I found him sitting on an overturned feed bucket, boots already laced, a duffel bag zipped at his feet, telling my dog goodbye like the dog was the only one he trusted to keep a secret. I stopped him before he reached the road. But what I found in a shoebox in my mother's attic 4 weeks later, and what that boy had been recording on a cracked phone for months, is the reason this story ends with a judge reading my own mother's name out loud in a courtroom, and my mother's face doing something I had never once seen it do in 34 years. Welcome to the channel. If stories about the families we choose hit different than the ones we're born into, you already know what this one's going to do to you. Stick around. There's a turn coming that even I didn't see, and I lived it. Before Eli and Sam, my life fit inside a barn schedule. I'm a large animal vet outside Montpelier, Vermont, the person farmers call at 4 a.m. when a mare's in trouble, the person who's learned to say hard things to people holding a flashlight and hoping I'm wrong. I'm steady with animals in crisis. I was a disaster at letting a human being help me with anything. My divorce happened at 29. My ex wanted a family that photographed well. I wanted to foster. Those turned out to be 2 different marriages wearing the same ring. I kept the farmhouse, the truck, and a guest room I painted, and never once put a bed frame in. 4 years of someday, folded up in a closet, like a promise I didn't trust myself to keep. The push finally came from a heifer, of all things. A dairy family 2 roads over lost their barn to a lightning strike, and their oldest boy, 15 maybe, spent the whole night alone getting the herd out while his parents were at the hospital with a younger sibling. Nobody thought to ask if he was okay. I stood in that scorched field at sunrise and thought, somewhere, a kid is always the one holding everything together and getting asked about it last. I started my foster license that spring. The call came in October. 2 brothers, the coordinator said, Eli, 16, and Sam, 7. 4 placements in 3 years between them. Then she did the thing caseworkers do when they think they're helping you brace. Heads up, Sam's a sweetheart. Eli's got some walls. I've learned to distrust that sentence completely. It's never about the kid. It's about who gave up on him first. They arrived with 1 backpack, split evenly, because Eli had packed it that way on purpose. Half his things, half his brother's, so that if only one of them got picked up somewhere, no one left empty-handed. I didn't understand that logic until months later. I understood it completely by the end. Sam ran straight for my dog. Eli stood in the doorway like a kid casing a building, counting exits, clocking my hands, deciding in about 4 seconds whether I was someone who yelled. Their file was thin on facts and heavy on damage. Mother incarcerated, father unknown, a grandmother who took them for 8 months and then had a stroke that left her unable to lift a coffee mug, let alone 2 boys. The foster placement after that lasted 11 weeks, long enough for the family to fall for Sam's dimples and quietly ask the agency, in writing, whether the older one could go somewhere else. Eli was in the next room when the call was made. He heard the whole thing through drywall. So when I tell people that boy didn't trust adults, I tell them he trusted the paperwork. It had never once lied to him. That first week, I learned Eli slept in his boots. Not his shoes, his actual work boots, laced, on top of the covers, like a fireman waiting on a call. He ate standing at the counter so he could see the door. He did dishes before I'd even finished my plate, like erasing evidence he'd used anything at all. I found out why on accident, folding laundry, sewn into the lining of his jacket, badly, with fishing line, the stitches of a kid teaching himself, was a folded $20 bill. Running money, he'd had it there since the placement before mine. I didn't say anything about the boots, or the money, or the way he flinched when I reached for a cabinet near his head. You don't announce that you've seen a kid's armor. You just quietly stop giving him reasons to need it. My mother, Diane, is 61, widowed young, remarried to a good man named Roger, and for 30 years the undisputed general of every holiday our family has ever survived. She showed up that first Sunday with a casserole and a clipboard's worth of opinions. She took one look at Sam, gap-toothed, loud, already narrating his own cartoon in the living room, and I watched something in her face just give, the way ice gives on a warm afternoon. She scooped him up like she'd been waiting her whole life for exactly this 7-year-old. Then she turned to Eli. What grade did you say you were in? Any trouble at your last school? Any trouble with, she paused delicately, the law? Eli answered in a flat, rehearsed voice, the voice of a kid who's been interviewed by strangers holding clipboards his whole life. My mother nodded like she was checking boxes. At the door, she hugged me and whispered, warm as anything, you don't have to keep both, you know. Nobody would blame you. I stood on my own porch afterward, feeling like I'd swallowed a stone. Here's where this story does something different than you'll expect, because for a long time, I was certain my mother was the whole problem. I was wrong about the shape of it, and figuring out how wrong nearly cost me everything. In January, someone called the agency. Anonymous. The letter said the older foster child had shown concerning aggressive behavior toward a younger child at a community event, and that the household seemed overwhelmed by a placement beyond its capacity. My caseworker, Priya, sat at my kitchen table and told me our finalization hearing, 6 weeks out, was frozen until an investigator cleared it. I was so sure it was my mother that I nearly called her and said something I couldn't take back. I didn't, because Roger, my stepfather, quiet as furniture his whole life, pulled me aside at the grocery store 2 days later and said something that stopped me cold. Your mother didn't write that letter. I watched her cry when Priya called her asking questions about it. He looked genuinely rattled. Someone's using this family to hurt that boy, and it isn't who you think. For 4 days, I didn't know who to be angry at. That not knowing was its own kind of exhausting. The investigation cleared Eli in 11 days. The aggressive behavior turned out to be Eli physically blocking a teenager at a 4-H event who'd cornered Sam and another small kid behind the livestock barn. 3 adults confirmed it. Eli was protecting, not attacking. Priya told me that part with real relief in her voice, but someone had still made that call, and the caseworker's report contained one detail that turned my stomach. The complaint had come from a number registered to my own family's landline, the farmhouse where my mother and Roger live. Roger swore up and down he hadn't touched the phone that week, which meant either my mother had lied to her own husband's face, or somebody else in that house had made the call and let her take the blame in my head. I want you to sit in that uncertainty with me for a second, because I sat in it for a long time. If you've ever had someone in your family hurt you, and you genuinely couldn't tell which someone, tell me below, because it changes how you fight back when you don't know who you're fighting. The answer came from a shoebox, and it came from grief, not detective work. My mother asked me to help clear out her late sister's things that February, my Aunt Bev, who died the previous fall, who I barely knew because she and my mother hadn't spoken in 15 years over something nobody ever explained to me. In a box marked B, Keep, under photographs and a church bulletin from 1988, I found a form. Adoption relinquishment. My mother's name, my mother's signature, dated the year she was 17. She'd had a son, before Roger, before my father, before any of us. A boy she'd given up because her own parents told her, in the exact clipped language she'd later use on Eli, that she wasn't in a position to keep him. She never spoke to Bev again after Bev sided with their parents in that decision. 15 years of silence, over a baby my mother had spent 40 years pretending never existed. I stood in that dusty attic and understood, all at once, two things that didn't cancel each other out. My mother knew exactly how much it costs a kid to be the difficult one who gets sent away, and that was precisely why watching Eli made her unravel. Not because she saw a threat. Because she saw the outcome of the choice that broke her, playing out again in her own kitchen, and she couldn't survive watching it a second time without trying to control it. It didn't make what she did to Eli okay. It made it make sense. Those are two very different things, and it took me a long time to stop confusing them. While I was piecing that together, Eli was quietly building his own case, and he never told me, because in his experience, telling an adult the truth got him moved, not the adult. For 4 months he'd been recording things, not sneakily, desperately, voicemails his caseworker left about the letter. A conversation he'd overheard between my mother and Roger, where she said, out loud, if that boy disappeared tomorrow, Sam would be fine, better even. A screenshot of a message from a cousin of mine, someone I barely spoke to, offering to help find him somewhere else to land, if things got too complicated, before the hearing. He showed me on a Thursday night in March, sliding the cracked phone across the table, the way you'd slide over a confession. I kept it, he said, because when a kid says something happened, nobody believes him unless he can prove it. I've never once been able to prove it before. I asked him why he hadn't told me sooner. He looked at the table a long time before he answered. Because you might have believed me and kept me anyway, and I didn't want to find out you wouldn't. That's the sentence that broke me, not the recordings. That sentence. I did something I'm still proud of, and it's the thing that actually saved us. I didn't confront my mother privately. I didn't try to manage it, smooth it, protect the family photo album version of events. I called Priya and Eli's guardian ad litem the next morning, and we went through every recording, dated, in order, on my kitchen table, on the record. Priya told me something I've never forgotten. Families that manage things quietly, she said, are usually managing them for the person doing the harm, not the person being harmed. I'd spent my whole life managing quietly. I stopped that Thursday. The hearing, delayed by the false report, was reset for the second week of May. 14 months, almost to the day, since 2 boys and 1 backpack came through my door. My mother found out the recordings existed. She did not back down. She announced she and Roger would be attending the finalization, as a family should. Through my cousin, she sent word, I have nothing to hide. A judge will see I only ever loved that little boy. She was certain, genuinely, terribly certain, right up until the moment a judge opened a folder thicker than any adoption petition has a right to be. The night before, I sat on the edge of Eli's bed while he turned his boots over in his hands, instead of putting them on. Vermont law meant nothing could happen without him saying yes, out loud, at 16. Nobody could say it for him, not me, not the state. I've said yes to every placement since I was 10, he told me. You learn to say yes fast so they don't change their mind. How's this yes supposed to sound any different? It's the first one that's yours to keep, I told him. Nobody signs it back. He set the boots down by the door, untied, for the first time since I'd known him. Family court in our county smells like floor wax and old radiators. Sam wore a clip-on tie he'd picked out himself and swung his legs the entire time. Eli sat beside me straight-backed, watching the door the way he watches every door. My mother and Roger sat 2 rows back. My mother had on her church pearls and an expression I now recognize as pre-forgiven, the look of someone who fully expects the system to agree with her, because it always had before. Then Judge Alvarez came in, carrying a stack of documents too thick for a routine finalization, and my mother's face did something I'd never seen it do. It flickered. "Before we proceed," the judge said, "there's material in this file that concerns the welfare of a minor, and it requires daylight." She read the anonymous complaint aloud, word for word. She read the investigator's finding, unfounded. She read 2 lines from Eli's recordings, just 2, flat and clinical, in a voice built for reading things exactly as they were, no more, no less. If that boy disappeared tomorrow, Sam would be fine, better even. I heard my mother's breath catch behind me. There's a particular sound a person makes when they hear their own voice read back to them by a stranger in a robe. I'd never heard it before that morning. The judge looked up. "Ms. Ashcroft, under oath, if this family asks you to choose between these boys again, at a holiday, a graduation, a hospital bed, what happens?" I could have softened it. I'd spent my whole life softening things for my mother. I chose not to. "There's no version of this where I choose again," I said. That choice ended the night a 16-year-old sat in my barn with his boots laced, ready to disappear so his little brother could be easier to love. Whoever can't hold both boys in the same heart doesn't get a seat at my table, including my mother. My mother was crying by then, real, and I let it be real without rushing to fix her face for her, which was its own kind of goodbye. Then the judge turned to the smallest chair at the table. "Sam, you're 7, so this part's just for the grown-ups to decide, and we already have." Sam beamed like he'd won something. Then she turned to Eli. "You're 16, which means none of this happens unless you say so. Out loud, right now, not your brother. Not Ms. Ashcroft, you." Eli stood. Nobody asked him to, he just did, and looked at my mother for one long second before he looked at me. "I've spent my whole life being the one somebody keeps if they can," he said. "I'd like to just be kept. Yes." Sam, who cannot be quiet for longer than 4 seconds in any courtroom on earth, announced to the entire room, "We're both staying, forever. I already told everyone at school." Even the bailiff laughed. The judge signed both decrees. Total elapsed time, less than it takes to make coffee. 14 months, 1 false report, 1 shoebox, 1 cracked phone, and the actual ending took 90 seconds. Outside, my mother was waiting by the elevator, smaller somehow than the courtroom had made her look. She didn't look at Eli. "You'll understand someday why I was scared," she said. "I do understand," I told her. "I found the shoebox, Mum. I know about Bev, and I know about the son you gave up. I'm not angry about what happened to you. I'm asking you to stop making Eli pay for it." For the first time in my life, my mother had nothing scripted to say back. Eli hung his boots by the door that week, actually by the door, on a hook, not laced to his feet at midnight. It took another 2 months before he stopped sleeping in them. The backpack he and Sam had split their whole lives between now holds camping gear. It comes down for weekends at the lake, and that's the only reason it ever leaves the closet. My mother sent 1 letter in June, addressed to both boys this time, no sweet one, no clipboard voice. We've had coffee twice since. I don't know yet what that relationship becomes. I know it isn't nothing, and for the first time in my life, that's allowed to be enough. Eli starts community college classes this fall. He paid the deposit himself, 3 weeks early, with money from a summer job. If you've never fostered a kid from the system, you might not clock what that means. It means betting real money that he'll still be here when the semester starts. He's betting on staying. For the first time, so am I. If someone in your life ever had to choose you out loud, in a room, when it cost them something, tell them what that meant, today, not someday. And if this story reminded you that love shows up as a choice you keep making, not a feeling you had once, share it with someone who needs to hear that today. I'll see you in the next one.